Welcome back to another top 5 video. Today we're going to be discussing 5 secret German World War II planes that actually flew. The key factor for a plane to have made its way onto this list is that it has to have flown in real life under its own power. This also means that prototypes and wooden mock-ups are excluded from the list. Planes like the EF-126, a prototype of a pulse-jet powered fighter plane. It was completed, but it never flew under its own power. Same goes for the Me-263. The 263 was built, but only flew in tests where it was towed by another plane. The Me-263 was intended to be an evolution of the rocket fighter, the Me-163. It never flew under its own power, so it cannot be on this list. Anyway, let's get to it. Number 5. The Blomenvoss BV-238. The BV-238 was the largest flying boat in history. Well, until just after World War II when it was dethroned by the Spruce Goose. This 6-engine behemoth weighs close to 60 tons. Only one 238 was fully completed. There were a further 2 more in production, but those 2 weren't completed due to the war's end. The 238 was being considered for 3 roles. It could be a heavy transport plane or a heavy bomber. Being a seaplane means that it doesn't need a large paved landing strip to take off and land at. Any body of water is good enough. Its large lifting capacity could allow it to carry a very large bomb load. The wings were so large that they could have had internal bomb bays within them. It could also have been used as a maritime patrol plane. For maritime patrol, it would work in the Atlantic Ocean supporting U-boat operations, either through recon or with anti-shipping weapons. The 238 could carry up to a maximum of 95 tons including its own weight and fuel. Its large internal area allowed for easy transportation of large quantities of supplies. Loading was rather easy with forward-facing clamshell doors. Unfortunately, there are no photos of the front doors open. You can see the seams of the door in this photo. If needed, the 238 could carry up to 300 troops. That's significantly more impressive than the Me-323, Germany's largest transport plane. Even that could only carry up to 130 troops. With its range of 7,000 kilometers, it will be ideal for reinforcing and resupplying the German African campaign. Allied anti-shipping efforts were causing havoc on the Italian shipping convoys to North Africa. Airlift initiatives with the Me-323 and other Luftwaffe transport aircraft were used to transport urgent supplies such as fuel to the Africa Corps. The 238 would have been useful in this theatre had it been ready in time. Originally, the 238 was designed to be a civilian plane, but that changed after the German Air Ministry requested that the plane be used for a military application. For its role in the Air Force, the 238 would need defensive armaments. The armament on this plane could make the B-17 Flying Fortress's armoured cousin, the YB-40, blush. The BV-238 was bristling with guns. There were 4 heavy-caliber quad machine gun turrets, one in the nose facing forward and another in the tail facing backwards. The other 2 turrets were mounted in the rear midsection of each wing facing backwards. 4 heavy machine guns would be placed along the plane's fuselage, 2 facing out at either side at the front and another 2 facing outwards at the rear. Lastly, there were 2 twin 2cm cannons in a rotating turret mounted on top of the fuselage. Even with all these weapons, the BV-238 had a dull ending. It was strafed by Allied fighters while sitting in dock. The last of its fuel had been taken away for more important aviation projects, so its test flights were on hold. Different sources argue over how actually the 238 was destroyed. Some sources say British fighters, and others say it was destroyed by American fighters. All I truly know is that the plane was destroyed, and any remains were taken away post-war. It's rather sad that it was destroyed, because it was mere days before the end of the war. Admittedly, not that the Allies knew that. There was a general idea that long-range German planes could be used to take high-ranking party officials out of the country and to South America. So it was key to attempt to destroy these long-range planes before they could escape. One very cute thing is that there's a 1/4 scale model of the plane commissioned for testing, the FGP-227. It's a fully functioning scale model of the BV-238. Testing of the scale model plane was stopped once the BV-238 was destroyed. The 238 was awesome for its time, but within a few years it was outstripped by the American H-4 Spruce Goose. It was another seaplane which was being designed during World War II as a way to transport supplies safely to the UK without risk of interception by U-boat. Its cargo capacity was enormous. It could even carry 2 Sherman tanks. I do have to add that the Spruce Goose didn't participate in many flight trials, so its flight characteristics are questionable. It's awesome that it has been preserved and is on display in the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum. I hope one day that I get the opportunity to visit that museum, because it will be amazing to see the H4 in real life. Number 4. The Yonkers Ju-390. The Yonkers Ju-390 was born out of the American Bomber Project. The idea was to design and build a bomber capable of reaching New York and making it back to Europe. The payload, ideally, would be big enough to be able to carry an atomic weapon. The plane didn't need to be able to do the journey from Germany who occupied France to America. It was also an option to use Portuguese islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean as launch points for the operation. That was until the Portuguese were not so friendly in 1943. Still, there were 2 airfields in France that were suitable as they were long enough and close enough to America. It was hoped that by bombing targets along the American East Coast, 2 things would be achieved. 1 was reducing the will of the American people to intervene in a European war. The second was stretching America's forces. America would have to commit large amounts of resources to provide protection for the East Coast. A mass of anti-aircraft defenses along the whole of Eastern America would have to have been built. Lots of planes will also have to be committed for interception of German bombers. Possibly, even fighters would have to be withdrawn from Europe to provide cover for the US. More realistically, the Ju-390 would have made a good maritime patrol plane, working with the Kriegsmarine in the Atlantic U-boat war. The Ju-390 is not an entirely new plane design. It's based off the Ju-290. The plane has essentially been stretched in length and widened. Even though the Ju-390 was a strategic bomber, which is a class of an air arm's largest bomber, it's really just a medium bomber with a few upgrades. German aviation doctrine was never really in favour of heavy bombing as a strategy. The Luftwaffe was designed to support the infantry through aerial superiority and close attack aircraft. Even medium bombers were expected to support the infantry if needed. The HE-177 is a medium bomber, yet it was fitted out with dive brakes so it could attack ground targets. As such, German industry was never set up for the production of heavy bombers. It also doesn't help that heavy bombers are expensive to make and maintain. If Germany wanted to switch war production from light planes to heavy, they would have to forego the benefit of having several light aircraft in return for one heavy. You can see how Russia faced this issue too. Even with the end of the war evident from the beginning of 1944, Russia's aviation manufacturing focused on light and medium bombers rather than heavy. Only after the war was focus given back to long-range strategic aircraft. The UK and America had different ways to approach warfare. They wanted to strike the enemy with as little loss of life to their own people as possible. The UK and America had the benefit of not having to actively defend a land border. This helped sway opinion to heavy bombing. This led to the British design of heavy bombers such as the Sterling and Halifax, leading to development of the iconic Lancaster. Same for America. They developed the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator so they could operate from safety and still effectively fight a war. This has been my long-winded way of saying that heavy bomber production takes resources and time to gear up, both of which Germany did not have in 1943, so a pimped out Ju-290 was the way to go. The 390 was originally meant to have 4 engines, but during the design phase, they couldn't secure engines powerful enough, so they had to compromise with 6 weaker engines. Its maximum range was 9,700 kilometers, so it was able to do a trip to America and back with 6.5 tons of bombs. Although it would take a while, around 36 hours round trip. It is reported that a Ju-390 flew within 20 kilometers within the coast of America. It was on a flight to test the feasibility of cross-Atlantic bombing. That flight is disputed to whether it happened or not. Different sources argue over the feasibility of that flight and whether or not it could have happened. When fully loaded, the plane would weigh 55 tons, not including bombs. The 10-man crew had a range of armament between them to defend the plane against interception. There were 2 turrets on the roof, each one with 2cm cannons. There were 2 heavy quad machine gun turrets, one in the front and one in the back. There was also another turret under the fuselage. Lastly, 2 positions in the waist of the plane on either side for machine guns. Only 2 Ju-390s were built before the war's end. There was a total order of 26 Ju-390s. The order was then cancelled later in the year 1944, as it was decided to give the resources to fighter programs rather than strategic bombers. There are only rumours and speculation about the service that the Ju-390 saw. The only concrete evidence was that they never dropped bombs on enemy soil. Most of their flying done was just test flights. Number 3. The Arado AR-232. The Arado AR-232 may not look like much of an exciting plane, and that's because it isn't. It's a transport plane for logistics. What does make it interesting is how it attempted to modernise air transportation. Germany's main transport plane was the Ju-52. It was originally a 1930s passenger plane. With its low lift capacity and slow speeds, it was rather outdated compared to other Allied transport aircraft at the time. The other major German air transport plane was the Me-321 glider and its powered variant, the Me-323. The massive cargo glider and plane required large landing strips to take off and land at. The AR-232 was to bridge the gap as a medium cargo transport plane. But 232 was designed with landing in short, rough airfields in mind. It could even land in unprepared fields if needed. That's the reason behind the bizarre landing gear, but we'll get to that in a bit. The AR-232 had some pretty neat features for a cargo plane of the time. The tail of the plane was designed with a twin tail boom in mind to give easy access to the rear loading ramp. The rear loading ramp allowed small vehicles to be driven inside, or for towed artillery pieces and other heavy guns to be rolled in, something that is a bit more tricky to do with typical side cargo hatches. Inside the cargo bay, up to 6 tons of supplies could be carried, or 24 armed men. The extra wheels decreased the overall weight on the main landing gear when taxiing. There's a total of 22 of the affectionately named millipede wheels. The main tricycle landing gear could be retracted in flight, but the millipede wheels couldn't. They were fixed. A special hydraulic system allowed the side rear gear legs to lower closer to the ground. The front gear leg could then be retracted into the plane. The plane could then rest on the smaller millipede wheels. Lowering the plane closer to the ground decreases the angle of the loading ramp. Surprisingly, for a transport plane, defensive armament was in mind during the design phase. There were 3 defensive positions: a heavy machine gun in the nose, a heavy machine gun just above the rear loading door, and finally a 2 cm cannon in a turret on the roof. The 4 crew members wouldn't be stationed at the guns all the time, only if they were flying through contested skies, and of course if an enemy fighter was spotted. Supposedly, 8 light machine guns could be mounted in the side windows of the cargo area. This would be for flights into contested skies when carrying troops. The men could use their light machine guns to assist in the defense of the plane. I haven't been able to find an account of this configuration actually being used though. This configuration may just be wishful thinking. Originally, the 232 was designed around having 2 engines, but had to resort to a redesign based on 4. There was demand from fighter programs that understandably had more priority at the time for the best and most powerful engines. Some of the AR-232s were built with 2 engines, but most with 4. The 4-engine variant also had an increased lifting capacity over the 2-engine variant, but it was at the cost of its maximum range. The 232 was looking like it would replace the Ju-52, but with its late introduction in 1943, the war was turning against Germany. There was little attention given to air transportation programs. There were also plenty of other transport planes that Germany had available. There's even a rather similar looking plane to the AR-232, the GO-244. The 244 was originally a glider that was refitted with engines. It could carry up to 24 men and even had a rear loading door. Its overall lifting capacity was lower than the AR-232. Still, they made 174 of them. A total of 22 AR-232s were built. This includes the 2-engine and the 4-engine variants. Number 2. The Heinkel HE-111H8, or really any plane with balloon cutters. This item on the list is more of just a heavy modification rather than a new plane. During the bombing of London, Moscow and other Allied towns, countermeasures were used to reduce the effectiveness of German strategic bombing. The most effective way of reducing German bombing is simple: just shoot down all their bombers. Not so easy to do. The next best option is to lower the effectiveness of German air raids. This is done with a combination of interceptors and ground-based defenses. Networks of ground-based anti-aircraft batteries would fill the skies with steel as they fired shell after shell at the foreign invaders. Firing for these batteries would be coordinated by radar and flight control stations, who will feed radar and observational data such as speed, height and direction to improve the gunner's accuracy. Men crewing searchlights will try to target enemy planes with their beams. With a bright light reflecting off the bombers, they'll be easy targets for interceptors. Ideally, fighter planes will already be in the air, ready to intercept the vulnerable bombers. Another type of defense that wasn't as fancy but got the job done were barrage balloons. Barrage balloons would be tethered to the ground by a cable. This cable would cut through the body or wing of any plane unfortunate enough to make contact with it. Think of it as an aerial mine, but with the mine going straight upwards as high as 3,000 meters, that's around 10,000 feet. If two balloons were tethered together, the cables could be as high as 4,500 meters or around 15,000 feet. German planes couldn't risk flying for these aerial minefields, so they had to fly higher in order to avoid the risk of collision with the balloon cables. By forcing bombers to fly higher, their accuracy decreases. It would also make the bombers easier targets for anti-aircraft guns, due to the guns not having to traverse and change elevation as quickly. This is especially important for heavy caliber guns. For you Londoners out there, here's a quick sidetrack. You know Primrose Hill? This photo is of twin 135mm or 5¼ inch anti-aircraft guns. They were part of London's air defence. Moving on. In the daytime, flying below the height of the balloon, it will be very difficult to see the wires that were connected to it. At nighttime, the cables may as well be invisible. With over 2,000 barrage balloons flying over England, this was an issue that needed to be dealt with. An experimental idea was tested out on German medium bombers. This idea was a balloon cutter. Big old lumps of metal stuck in front of the wings, engine and nose of the plane. This idea was tested on the Heinkel 111 and the Ju-88. The overall result was that it wasn't too effective. The extra weight messed with the center of gravity of the plane, giving it not so nice flight characteristics. Pilots flying the planes were very unsettled with the performance of the plane. It also didn't help that the British were experimenting with explosive cables to be connected to the barrage balloons. The project soon came out of favour, with only a few planes being converted into balloon cutters. It was seen as more dangerous to the crews in the plane than it was worth attempting to take out the balloons. Some of you may be asking, why not just shoot the balloons down? It would take time to shoot the balloons down. Even with machine guns punching hundreds of holes into a balloon, it would still take ages for a balloon to deflate and be dragged down by the weight of the cables. While spending time engaging the balloon, the fighter or bomber is being targeted by enemy interceptors or flak. The longer spent in hostile territory, the more chance of not returning back to base. There was a case in August 1940 when the Germans did a dedicated raid on barrage balloons over England. The result was 40 balloons were downed at the cost of 6 German aircraft. The very next day, more balloons were back up. The cost of destroying the balloons was not worth the loss of planes in the raid. Number 1. The Heinkel HE-280. In July 1944, a British Mosquito was shot down by an Me-262. It was the first recorded victory in a jet fighter ever. But the Me-262 wasn't the first jet fighter. There was another plane, the HE-280. The first jet-powered plane to fly was the Heinkel HE-178. It was little more than a testbed for a new jet engine design. It first flew in 1939. Its development and construction was kept a secret from the German Air Ministry. The 178 was revealed to the German Air Ministry only after its completion and its flight tests had been done. The 178 showed off its flight characteristics in a demonstration. There was little interest in the plane, as the single-engine jet plane had a top speed of 600 km per hour, a speed which at the current time propeller-driven aircraft could easily compete with. Its flight endurance was also not impressive, with a flight time of around 10 minutes. This plane was the first step in jet plane evolution. It's also important to remember that it was thought that the war in Europe would take less than a few years. With the absorbing of countries and the successful invasion of Poland and France, both of which took less than 2 months, you can see how war priorities were looking at short-term rather than long-term. From private investors, there was also little interest in the project, so the development of the 178 was slow. Taking what they had learned from the failures of the HE-178, Heinkel refocused their efforts into making their next jet-powered plane better. Unlike their last plane, this plane was built to be a fighter plane. Its armament would be 3 20mm cannons in the nose. The main issue was power output. This was solved with not only using more powerful engines, but by also using 2 engines instead of 1. The 280 flew for the first time in 1941. It was arguably one of the most advanced planes in the world at the time. It had a top speed of 820 km per hour. Improved engine output and better fuel consumption gave the 280 almost twice the range of the 178. A total of 9 prototypes were produced over 3 years, with updates and improvements to the engines between models. Slow engine development was the death of this project. The ME262's engines were capable of producing more thrust than the engines of the HE280. It is important to keep in mind that the ME262 was being produced by both BMW and Yonkers, both of which were funded by the Air Ministry to produce a jet fighter. Heinkel was using self-funding for their jet project. Still, Heinkel was the first organisation able to get a jet fighter operational first. Remember earlier when I said it was the most advanced plane for its time? Whilst that might be true, it certainly wasn't because of its speed. The HE280 was the first ever plane to be fitted with an ejector seat system. Also, it was the first plane to have its ejector seat used. The ejector seat was first used when a test flight on a new pulse jet engine went belly up. The pilot lost control of the plane due to heavy ice and had to eject. As a side note, the prototype being tested was the 4th HE280 produced. It had been configured with a new power plant. The 2 jet engines had been replaced with up to 6 pulse jet engines. No source agrees on whether the HE280 had been refitted with 2, 4 or even 6 pulse jets, the same type of engine used on the V1. I really wish I could see a picture of this monstrosity. I've seen a plane with 2 pulse jets, but not 6. It must have been a rather unpleasant plane to fly, as pulse jets are not known for their smooth ride. There was a demonstration of the HE280 to the German Air Ministry. This time, the work on improving the engines and airframe had paid off. The Air Ministry requested the production of 300 HE280s. Engine issues with the first few 280s received by the Air Ministry caused the delivery of further planes to be delayed, while Heinkel attempted to fix the issues. With a long delay, Heinkel was ordered that all work on jet planes should cease, and that they need to focus their efforts onto other projects. Before I wrap up this video, I just want to show you an early prototype ME262. It was the first ME262 to fly. It had a traditional propeller as well as the new BMW jet engines. It's a very interesting hybrid. This configuration was used on the very first ME262 variant when the engines were still not reliable. There's probably a joke I can make about late war German jet engine reliability, but I'll save it for another video. Well, there you have it. Those are my top 5 secret German World War II planes that actually flew. We saw the world's biggest flying boat during World War II, a plane which could travel from Europe to America and back again to drop a nuclear weapon with no fuel stops, a medium-sized cargo plane capable of landing in rough fields due to its interesting landing gear setup, planes modified to slice through barrage balloon cables, and lastly, the world's first operational jet fighter. I hope you enjoyed this top 5 list, and if you have any suggestions for what you think should have been on this list, feel free to tell me in the comments. There is a good chance that I may have already covered the plane you're talking about in another one of my top 5 videos already. One last thank you, and I hope you enjoyed your time.
Like, comment and subscribe, or I'll break your f***ing legs.